Yo, what's up, you guys? This is episode 5 of the Untitled Book Club Podcast. We still do not have a name yet. Please bear in mind, this might actually be our unofficial official name, the Untitled Book Club Podcast. Anyways, for today's episode, we have a really good book called Contagious. Paige, could you show the book for us one time? This book is by Jonah Berger. Is that how you say his name?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's an excellent marketing book and social psychology book, and we're going to talk so much more about it. But before we begin in discussing the book, let's just introduce ourselves again for people who are just tuning in, people who find us on the internet. My name is Terrance Reynolds. I am the co-host of the Untitled Book Club Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram. That's my primary way of contacting me, which is Terrance Reynolds 95. But I have to give a caveat. It's spelled TERRANCEE 95. It's an extra E at the end. Someone stole my actual name, so I have to deal with it. But Paige, could you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Paige. You can follow me on Instagram as Paige Flipper, which is PAYGE_FLIPPER.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Paige, before we get started, how are you doing today? It's pretty late over there. We're recording in 2 different time zones.
I'm good. It's been a hectic day. I got a bike, which is awesome. Stationary bike.
Yeah.
And I've been riding it. So had to buy some special shoes because, take your shoes off in the house, but they have spikes on the pedals.
Really?
So I had to buy some. Yeah, it's like it's not like spikes. It's just uncomfortable if you're riding bare feet. So, or barefoot.
Uh-huh.
So I went and got a pair of just cheap sneakers for my house sneakers is what I call them. So the intent is to not have them go outside, because then what would be the point of buying house sneakers?
That's a good point. Can you do that in flip flops, or are you afraid the flip flops is gonna shoot out if you go too fast?
Well, no, it has straps, so it straps your feet in. Okay. So yeah, I guess theoretically you could.
I mean, if you really wanted to build some really strong calluses on the bottom of your feet, you can just do barefooted, just let those things just poke you. And then after a year or so, you have the toughest feet. You have jungle feet.
I don't want that.
But anyways, it's the same old for me. I'm in Tokyo, Japan. So it's morning time for me. So I'm just really getting into the swing of things. I got my cup of coffee to the side of me. I'm trying to get warmed up throughout this podcast. We're going to try to, insert more energy over time, but I'm just waking up and she's getting ready to go to bed. So it's a massive time difference. But should we begin with the book? Let's begin.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's do a quick introduction of the book.
So before we get started and go into a deep dive in the podcast, let's just do a brief overview of what exactly this book is. And as a reminder, the book is called Contagious. And let's just do a basic summary of what exactly this book is talking about. So in the book Contagious, the author reveals the secret science behind word of mouth and social transmission. Throughout the book, he reveals the 6 basic principles of popularity and the virality of ideas, behaviors, and products. He explains how everything from a workplace rumor, YouTube video, political policy can become contagious. He has 6 basic principles, simply known as STEP. And those 6 basic principles are what we're going to be covering in this podcast today. And STEP is an acronym. So each letter represents something inside of this word. So the first one, STEP, social currency. Social currency simply means, and this is just a one-liner, people desire to look good in front of others. The second one, triggers. Top of minds means tip of tongue. The third one, emotions. We share things that we care about. The fourth one, public. Built to show, built to grow. The fifth one, practical value, news you can use. And then the last one are stories. People don't think in terms of information. They actually think in terms of narratives. So let's just go through it one by one. First chapter of the book is social currency. And let's just talk about what exactly that means. So here's a deep dive into social currency. People desire to look good in front of others. They want to seem smart, cool, and remarkable, and in the know. Social currency make people feel like insiders. It gives them a sense of status among their peers because information and ideas that they share, products and services that they have or have access to are inherently interesting or scarce. And basically what that's saying is that, we have a human psychology to want to impress people. That's kind of a part of our makeup. And social currency, or things that are considered forms of social currency, are generally scarce in nature. They're inherently interesting, and we have a natural inclination to share that, and people have a natural inclination to like receive that. So I'm pretty sure many of us intuitively understand that just in conversations, that we share things that we think are interesting. We want to hear things from people that we think are interesting. A lot of marketing principles in general, I think we understand it intuitively because the world is filled with marketing. It's all over the place. It's advertisements everywhere. We interact with each other. So a lot of like marketing books, for those who are interested in this sort of topic as a whole, it's mostly just putting a magnifying glass on human behavior. So I still think it's like high degree of value in studying marketing, because that magnifying glass gives you details of exactly how things work, and also shows you how to exactly and properly execute some of these practices. So a lot of things that you're going to hear today in this podcast will be intuitive to you, but maybe you haven't realized it, or maybe it's been like just like a underlying or an invisible force in your life, and you didn't really realize like how much of a presence it has. So social currency, let's talk about that exactly. And to talk about it, I would like to give an example, because sometimes explaining some of these practices can be very difficult if we start immediately on like the actual bullet points and the information is. So let's give a story. And the first example is actually from the book. The owner, there's this restaurant in New York City. It's called Criff Dogs. It's this big, beautiful restaurant. It has some of the best hot dogs in the world. And yeah, just imagine like you're going into New York City, you're going to like this hot dog restaurant, and you can get a breakfast hot dog served with eggs and bacon. You can get a lunch hot dog, a dinner hot dog. It is like hot dog heaven is out of this restaurant. People go there all of the time to enjoy their delicious meals. And basically, and the restaurant was really successful. So this wasn't really where the social currency aspect lies, but we'll get into that later. The author had a very successful restaurant in New York City, and he actually had a liquor license for this Criff Dogs restaurant, but he didn't really utilize it. I guess he wasn't selling too many liquor products or alcoholic products. He did a couple experiments, but it really wasn't his thing. But he had an idea to open up a bar that's like nearby. So just for context, right next door to a Criff Dog restaurant, so it was a struggling bubble tea lounge. And the author had this brilliant idea with his team to like purchase that struggling bubble tea lounge space and then open up a bar so you can serve alcohol. The problem is, in a place like New York City, there's like 60 bars in like a 4-block radius of Criff Dogs. Like, how do you get people to come to your bar, especially when they already have loyalty and they have familiarity established with all these other bars that are nearby? I mean, you're pretty much a commodity at that point. So he had this brilliant idea. So this is what he did. The owner decided to purchase the bar right next door to the restaurant, but he decided to do something different. He concealed off the space, and it's kind of like secretly attached to a Criff Dog restaurant, if you're following me. And he placed one of those old rotary phone booths, those old school phone booths in the 1920s page, like the things that you see like in the city of London or like New York City or Chicago. If you ever watched the old style American movie, he decided to place a phone booth inside the Criff Dog restaurant. And inside of this phone booth, there was like a secret door that no one knew about. So the way it works is that you'll go into this phone booth after you like enter into a Criff Dog restaurant. And then you would just like kind of like, use that little dialer, like a little spinning dialer, and like, type in a certain code. And if you typed in a certain code successfully, or you spun the certain code successfully, like a secret door just like open up in the restaurant, and then you can like go into this lounge, and it was like this beautiful like jazz old school speakeasy, super classic, super classical vibe, like that sort of feeling. And that's step one, a part of his grand master plan. But he also had other principles that he wanted to like add into it. So he named the bar, because every bar needs a name. He called it Please Don't Tell. He wanted the bar to feel like a secret. He wanted people to feel special and knew that if you found this bar, that this is like this top secret thing and you're super cool. So this is what he did. He named the bar Please Don't Tell. And he put like the secret door, and then you had to like type in like the secret password. But the problem is like, okay, Terrance, how do you get the password? What's the password? You actually had to call in to get the password the day of. So, you had to book a reservation essentially, but the reservation wasn't open 24/7. It wasn't open throughout normal business hours. Reservations open at 3:00, and they close at 3:30. And essentially this kind of created this like, this supply and demand effect, because like people had to call in immediately the day of to get the reservation. So it kind of like sparked this sense of urgency among people and a sense of exclusivity. And think about it. if you want, and this is where social currency kind of lies. Like if you were in New York City and you want to impress someone, like you're going out on a date or you're hanging out with your friends, or you're with your coworkers, and you wanted to seem cool and you wanted to seem in the know, you can go to all the other 60 bars that are in that 4-block radius of Crib Dogs. Or you can go to a bar called Please Don't Tell that has that in order to get to, you need to have a passcode that changes daily. And there's a secret phone booth that you have to spin and it opens up. And it gave this bar a sense of exclusivity. And that's kind of like the essence of social currency. What do you think, Paige?
No, yeah. I remember reading that part in the book, and I was like, that would be an amazing experience to be in the know enough to, one, know the bar exists, two, have the code. And then just imagine someone watches you walk into that phone
like
booth
eating your
and
hot
you
dog.
Don't come out.
like you're in hot dog heaven right now. And like someone just like walks to the phone booth and they just don't come out. Like, first off, I would think someone is like, I think like it always reminds me of
like somebody's playing with me right now.
Like they just disappeared to the phone booth. Like, I like that guy must be a superhero. That must be Clark Kent right there. That's super cool. Let's break that down, like exactly what's going on here, because we're going to get into exactly what this means. So first and foremost, they did no traditional marketing for the bar called Please Don't Tell. There's no advertisements. There's no Facebook campaigns. There's none of that. It is exclusively word of mouth. And we're going to get to how important word of mouth is later on in this podcast. So it's essentially, for those who study marketing, this is a form of, it doesn't do push marketing. This is actually a form of pull marketing. It garners interest and it pulls people in, rather the company trying to push their products onto people. It's also in a way a discovery brand. It's supposed to be a secret. And like fun human psychology that all of us don't like to admit, secrets aren't very secret. Like, you know, when you tell someone like, yo, this is a secret, it almost gives people the incentive to want to share that information with other people, or it gives some people the urge to want to do that. So it kind of plays off this idea that a secret inherently has higher value than any information that is seen as common. So you name a bar, Please Don't Tell, and you establish it in this aura of secrecy. It makes people want to share it. And think about it. You go to like there, after you leave this bar, you're hanging out with your friends on Monday, or you're going to work on Monday, and they ask you, yo, so Paige, what did you do? He's like, I went to this secret. You start spreading word of mouth. Like, this is such an interesting story that you say, I went to this secret bar. Someone took me to this secret bar. They typed inside this rotary passcode. And then like the bar opened up and they took me to like this very secretive lounge, and it was like super cool. Like that is such a cool story that you cannot wait to share when you call your best friend or when you go to work on Monday, versus if someone took you to Arby's. No offense to Arby's. That's not something that you would just want to share. There's no secrecy in that. And it's just there's no inherent social value and there's no social currency. And like taking someone to Arby's, Burger King, and McDonald's, but a bar called Please Don't Tell, you got to tell somebody about it, ironically speaking. So again, nothing is more powerful than word of mouth. Yeah, being able to share this top secret restaurant kind of makes you look good in front of others. Like when you have access to something that's like no one knows about, it just makes you seem like you're really plugged in and you're really in the know. So it gives you that cool factor that is a core component of what social currency is. Let's talk about this, Paige. What do you think? Tell me what you think of social currency.
Yeah, I agree that when you have something that's a secret or something that's high value, it definitely does make you look cooler when you, even though you're not supposed to tell, because Please Don't Tell, it still makes you look cool. And ironically, in the book, it's even like the Please Don't Tell bar has a card because they know you're gonna tell.
100%.
Like they know you're gonna tell.
Yeah, 100%.
And so they're like, on the off chance that you do tell, here's a business card so you can tell your friends about it, but don't tell.
Yeah, 100%. Like, would you go to a bar like that? I actually never been in New York, believe it or not. And I would actually like to find this bar. You know, this bar is like maybe created like a decade ago, so it can't be that much of a secret anymore. But the components are probably still there if you have to call in and set a reservation. Actually, someone took me to a bar in Tokyo that's very similar to that. It's like in this nondescript house in a very rich neighborhood of Tokyo called Omotesando. Well, I think it's at the end of Omotesando. And basically, like, you walk inside this nondescript building, and then you enter into like the primary entrance. And then in the primary entrance is a secondary entrance, but you don't really know that it's there at first. It's like this wall. It's like this mirror-like wall that it just casts your own reflection. And what happens is like this panel kind of opens up to the left of you, And then you have to like type in like the daily passcode. And then once you do that, like the wall just opens up and take you to this beautiful restaurant. I mean, this beautiful restaurant / bar. And just that experience alone just makes it feel unique. It makes it feel genuine versus me going to like the streets of downtown Tokyo and just walking into any high class bar or any casual bar. Like just that sense of exclusivity is like,
Makes you feel
it
good.
makes you feel good. Thank you. That's the perfect word for it. It makes you feel good. So let's talk about some other forms of social currency. So, and one of the forms of social currency I think of beyond this example they had in the book is I think NFTs might actually be a form of social currency. I know it's pretty new. And those who don't know, NFTs are non-fungible tokens. If you guys follow internet craze, internet culture, blockchain technology, or anything alike, like I'm pretty sure you heard about it over the past month. And people are like, yo, what's the value of NFTs? Like, because essentially what it is that you have ownership over a digital file, but anyone can copy this digital file. And I think the value behind it simply is I own it. It's really that simple. I can tell other people that I own it. I can show other people I own it. I mean, and people are like, well, what's the point of that? Well, I think historically speaking, human beings have like drawn towards the aspect of social currency. I mean, just throughout history. So if you take modern examples of like baseball cards, they have endless copies. They're really cheap to make, but some people have that first edition baseball card and it's like really special to them, and be able to say, hey, I have this, is powerful. And there's value behind that because you can also sell that baseball card to someone else. And then they have that form of social currency as well. So you can brag about that you own it with your friends. Another form of social currency, and you see it all the time, is like, and I want to get your thoughts on this page. You know how guys are like really into sneakers, and some girls too.
Yeah, I have someone that I used to work with was a total
Yeah.
sneakerhead. I have some women in my family that are
Yeah.
sneakerheads too. Like owns just so many different sneakers, exclusive sneakers that you have to like wait in line
Exactly.
for, be on a wait list for. So yes. Continue.
Yeah, like so, like let's think about that. Like most sneakerheads, and I'm not really a sneakerhead, but I do like I'm very picky when it comes to sneakers. No one wants to go to like that random shop in the mall like Macy's and just buy any off-the-shelf sneakers. People want the sneakers that are somewhat exclusive, that are somewhat hot. Why? Because they want to look good in front of others. They want to look cool. And I was doing some research into sneaker culture. It's believe it or not, if Nike or Adidas were to release, like, let's say that like Adidas, for example, were to release the new Yeezys and they were to make them, they were massively produce them, it would actually lower the value of it. Like from a societal standpoint, they release, if they release a million Yeezys, people wouldn't want to buy it. People actually prefer to buy sneakers that are like low in quantity because it makes people feel unique. It has that element of scarcity and exclusivity, which inherently make you look cool. There's like tons of studies that you can look into on the internet. And maybe I might actually link to some of those studies like inside of the YouTube notes and the podcast notes of this episode, where you would see that if you release a shoe to everybody and anyone can get it, it makes people buy it less. But if you put limited quantities, and this is what they do, they would take a new sneaker form factor, and they will have a very unique colorway, and they will release that colorway in a very limited scale. People will buy that colorway, and they will introduce a point of scarcity because it's limited. And then maybe a couple of months down the line, they will have a slightly altered version, and they will release that mass to the public. So now they can have like the best of both worlds, where like the people who want that exclusive version of the shoe, they still have that. They still have that point of scarcity, but then they have the ones that everybody else can wear that's like slightly less attractive, and people want it slightly less for the people who just kind of want the shoe anyway. So they're able to find that balance. And that shows you that, like social currency, like that shows the currency, inside of the sneaker world. Other forms of social currency, I'm trying to think. And if you have one page, please interrupt me because I'm trying to like rattle some off the top of my head. You have NFTs, you have sneaker cultures. Do you have an example?
So for social currency, even something as simple as cars.
Yeah.
People getting like,
Teslas.
BMW, Porsches, BMWs, those Mercedes Benz, like those high-end luxury cars. If you have a luxury car, it signals status, which I think that's ultimately when people are looking at social currency or the psychology behind it, ultimately what you're trying to signal is your status, whether that's you have wealth status by being able to own a luxury car, whether you have just intelligence status by having a certain degree or a certain number of degrees. Interestingly enough, I met someone who had like 3 PhDs and 4 masters and like 2 bachelors.
That's social currency.
I'm like, yeah, that's a form of social currency, but also person really did like to learn a lot. Yeah. But yeah, like you could have a social status. All of these are a form of social status. Even if you're a sneakerhead and you have all these exclusive sneakers, that is putting you at the top of a social status inside of that community.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because an education is an education, no matter what school you go to. I mean, like, let's say, for example, Harvard and then like random community college in the middle of America. Is math any different at random community college compared to Harvard? Absolutely not. The only difference is that certificate. It's that Harvard brand, like what is that air of exclusivity. The fact of the matter is Harvard only lets in, let's say, X amount of people per year, but it's the largest endowment in the world. They have plenty of space. They have the resources, let in a whole lot more people, but they don't, because they understand that it's not necessarily the education at Harvard that matters. It's the exclusive nature of the brand that matters. It's the scarcity. It's the idea that when you show someone that you went to Harvard, you have a very powerful form of social currency in the professional and social life. Yeah, and it's not just vanity. Like, according to like Harvard neurosciences, disclosing information about ourselves is intrinsically rewarding. We share information that is interesting or entertaining. We talk about the cool restaurant, like in the example of Crib Dogs and the secret bar that's attached to it. But we don't really talk about how difficult it is to find parking. We kind of like filter out information and only really talk about the things that provide a social currency. Like, you have an entire platform like social media, like Instagram, that relies on like the mechanics of social currency. We align ourselves to things that we think are cool. We share music that we think is cool and exclusive. We share, we share moments of us at very cool places, but we don't really share us parking. We don't really share us, doing grocery shopping, because that's not inherently interesting, and that doesn't provide us a heightened sense of social status. And this exists in the digital age as well as in like previous ages, such as like the tribal age. When you think of like a chief inside of like Native American cultures, like the idea like they wore like, these tribal marks across their face. Like, why did they do that? They wanted to like, reveal to other people their status among their peers. That's a form of social currency. It exists all throughout history. And what we're doing, even in a modern age, and as modern people, we consciously perpetuate this need for social currency. Yeah. So, wrapping up, let me conclude. Social currency. Just as people use money to buy products or services, they use social currency to achieve a desired positive impression among their family, friends, and colleagues. In order to utilize the principle of social currency, make people feel like insiders when you're introducing a product, idea, or behavior. Introduce scarcity and exclusivity, and people are more likely to share your products. Scarcity and exclusivity help products catch on by making them seem more desirable. If something is difficult to attain, people assume that it must be worth value. And that's social currency for those who are listening.
Thank you, Terrance.
No problem. I'm trying.
I do also, I want to make a quick note about social currency, because you mentioned Harvard. On Netflix, there is this documentary. You heard about the college scandal.
Which one?
The woman from Full House went to jail for it. I forget her name.
Her daughter. It happened in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They actually talked about, they didn't specifically mention social currency, but they talked about the idea that when it comes to going to Ivy League schools, the reason that they have a lot of value, yes, education and, attracting high-end professors, but also the fact that you get the title and accolades that go with that. So that raises the value, because sure, there are arguably probably some things that Ivy Leagues have that private and public institutions don't, but on the grand scheme of things, it's not that significant in order for it to have like job discrimination.
Yeah.
And they talk about that. So fun fact, watch it. Excuse me. They also talk about the whole scandal, but the only reason I want to bring that up is because you mentioned Ivy League and social currency, and that was indirectly part of the documentary.
I think that's a great example. And yeah, thank you for giving that example for us and the listeners as well. Like, because I think people should check it out. So it's on Netflix, right?
Yeah, I'm like, the name is escaping me, but it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's probably still in the top 10 most watched.
Yeah, you could probably even Google it. I've seen, because it was such a popular news story. You could probably just type in Full House daughter Netflix scandal, and then you'll probably find like the documentary that she's referencing to. But do you think we should move on to like the next aspect of STEP, which is triggers?
Yeah, triggers. Yes.
Take it away, Paige.
Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about in the steps process or principles is triggers. So what is a trigger? Triggers are environmental or conversational cues that remind you of a particular product, idea, or experience. I personally really vibed with this part of the book because a lot of the things that Jonah was talking about, I'm like, I totally relate.
Yeah.
I want to give you some examples of good triggers, which are triggers that are effective, and some ineffective triggers. So for example, a good trigger, Terrance, when I say peanut butter, what do you think of?
Hamburgers. I'm joking.
You're a
Jelly.
lie.
I'm joking. Of course,
And
jelly. Yeah.
most people would think of peanut butter and jelly because peanut butter is a trigger of jelly, and jelly is a trigger of peanut butter because they're often paired together. So that's one type of trigger. This came out in our time. Cringeworthy as it may be,
Yeah,
we all know this song. And they, when Friday rolled around, this song was an anthem in middle school for no reason.
that was high school.
That was middle school.
That was
high
grade. School. That was that was high school. We are not
I'm
that
Googling
young.
it right now. No. Yes, it was.
That was 2012.
Friday song. Hold on. I'm fact checking Terrance right now.
All right,
viewers.
I'll tell you.
Let's see. The Friday song by Rebecca Black. Oh no, it's gonna play in the background. I don't want it to play. No.
Go ahead. Just type in release date. Type in release date.
Oh yeah, you're right. I don't know why I clicked on the video. Release date.
Yeah.
Release date. We were in a. Oh my god! I
told you. Yo, we are. Why not does this feel like
middle school? Anywho, all right. Terrance was right. We're at high school. I was in middle school. I don't know about.
You're
Terrance.
older than me. Stop capping.
I'm not that old, guys. So Rebecca Black came out with this song Friday, and it goes like, "It's Friday, Friday." Hate the song, terrible song. They mention it in the book, but if you were to look at the charts, when this song came out, it spiked every Friday because it literally repeated Friday in the song, and Friday was a trigger. So on Fridays, people, cringeworthy as it was, decided to Google this song more on Friday. So that's another example of an effective trigger. Ineffective triggers, or one ineffective trigger that also was mentioned in the book that resonates with my soul, is reusable grocery bags. Here in Seattle, a lot of the stores use recyclable grocery bags. Story time. I was riding my bike to Whole Foods, and unfortunately, on the way back, like just immediately leaving the store, the handles broke on the bag. I had some pretty heavy stuff. They even double bagged it and still broke, and it broke twice. So they gave me some free Whole Food bags, and I was like, turn up, because these bags were like $15, $20 per bag. They gave me 2 of them. So I was like, come up. And every time I go to Whole Food, there is a 90% chance that I'm gonna forget these bags. Whenever I go to any type of store, 90% chance I'm going to forget this bag. So intuitively, you're like, okay, what can I do to make me remember to bring these bags? So when you're asking yourself those types of questions, what you're really saying is, what type of trigger can I associate with this bag so I can remember to take this bag with me to the grocery store? Needless to say, all of my triggers failed. So trying to put the bags in the car. Well, when you come home with the groceries in your bag and you take the groceries in the house, most likely you're not going to want to take those bags back to the car. In the book, he mentions putting your grocery list with the bag. I'm a psychopath. I don't have a grocery list. So
we're in the same boat. Same here. Yeah.
Or maybe people with grocery lists are psychopaths. I don't know. But there's no good trigger. So as much as I love the concept of recyclable bags, or reusable bags, excuse me, until I have an effective trigger to remind me around shopping time that I have these reusable bags, I'm going to forget. Unfortunately, 90% of the time that I lose these bags or forget these bags, 100% of those times, I remember the grocery bag as soon as I pull up to the store. It's an effective trigger. So that is just a quick summary of some good and bad triggers, but there's so much more to this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So when triggers are used correctly, and I'm reading verbatim my notes on here. So when triggers are used correctly, they can encourage consumers to not only purchase, but also share products, ideas, and or experiences with others. And this type of sharing is called word of mouth. Before I go into the importance of word of mouth, Terrance, do you have any good examples or bad examples, or let's not say bad, ineffective
Yeah.
examples of
Well, I
triggers?
mean, you can also learn a lot through bad examples as well, because those are teachable moments. But when I read the chapter, I immediately started thinking of, remember a couple of years ago during the NFL, I think Colin Kaepernick, when he kneeled, I forgot the exact movement name, but when he kneeled because of police brutality, he had an actual name for the movement, but that's irrelevant. A lot of people are debating on whether or not, like, why do this grandstanding or grand kneeling, and just why not just like not work for the NFL? But I always thought that was very ineffective when people say you could have just quit. Like, you're a millionaire, you can just quit and you can just, like, work full time. I think, and I don't know if he did this purposefully, but I think what Colin Kaepernick did was actually right, because when you think of triggers, you think of things that trigger you, things that spark, or like, spark that thought. Every single time he kneeled. So let's have two scenarios. The first scenario is like, what actually happened. He kneeled every single football game. And every single time he kneeled every football game, it forced us to have a conversation or reminded us the purpose of him kneeling. Those were triggers. Now, in an alternate reality where he just quit and he made this grand stand, maybe you might would have respected him more. Maybe you would have been like, oh my God, like he dropped out, he made this big grand gesture, and the news talked about it for 1 week. But then what? How do you encourage awareness? How do you continue the conversation? Be quite frank, maybe you don't. But when he decided to go into the game, especially for that extended season that he did it for, every single time he kneeled, it sparked us to have a conversation. Even when they let him go and they kind of blackballed him from the league, his presence was still there. Like, that absence of Colin Kaepernick, every single football game, people thought about when Colin Kaepernick is going to come back. And it reminded us of the whole entire purpose of why he knelt in the first place. And that conversation, if you remember, it lasted for like over a year. It lasted a long time before it kind of like dispersed. And I think that's a very example powerful of triggers, because he's leveraging that weekly football game to, like, and I don't really watch football, but he leverages the weekly football game to like encourage people to think about these social justice issues. Yeah. So, like, long story short, like, what Colin Kaepernick did for the league was a form of, like, ongoing triggers. Like, he constantly kept reminding people of like this particular topic and this idea that he wanted society to recognize. So that's my example of what a trigger is. Paige has a lot more. She has incredibly detailed notes on this subject. So I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. So some more important or some more things to identify when you're thinking of triggers is the importance of word of mouth. And I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, that I'm like, hey, this type of sharing is called word of mouth. The importance of word of mouth is that there's two types, and depending on the type is going to have a particular impact. So number one, we have immediate word of mouth, and this is sharing information or sharing an experience or an idea immediately after you have an experience. And then you have ongoing word of mouth, which are those conversations you have weeks or months following an experience. And these are more of your ongoing conversations. So, for example, an immediate word of mouth example would be you go to Disneyland and you have a blast. It's your first time there, you have a blast, you get to see all the Disney princesses and princes and it's just a great time.
Yeah.
And when you come back, let's say you did this during vacation, whether it's spring break or vacation from work, you go back to work and, people usually ask, what did you do over your vacation? Right? Then you're probably going to share your amazing experience at Disneyland, or even better, immediately after, maybe the next day after Disneyland, you call up a friend and say, oh my gosh, I had so much fun at Disneyland. Ongoing word of mouth is more so like those continuous conversations. So one example that the book talks about is the anti-smoking campaign. If you remember back in the day, Terrance, I hate that phrase because it makes us seem like we're so much older than we actually are.
Back in the day.
If you remember the anti-don't smoke campaigns, or even better, I don't know if you went through a DARE program, but we had DARE, which was anti-drugs. I don't remember what the DARE acronym actually stand for. It was pretty much don't do drugs. Every other week, a police officer will come in and talk about why drugs are bad.
Yeah.
But what makes these campaigns successful or unsuccessful is the frequency. So with the anti-smoking campaign, you see there was commercials all the time giving you facts about cigarettes, showing you how dirty your lungs are going to be, showing you these high emotional images that made you say, you know what, I don't want to smoke cigarettes. Hashtag movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and Stop Asian Hate. Part of the triggers are the people who are in those communities who experience discrimination or sexism or racism, and then them sharing their experiences keeps the conversation ongoing. And then you see other things like jobs creating sensitivity training and diversity and inclusion training, which also keeps those conversations alive. And so those are examples of ongoing conversations. But at the end of the day, you can have a lot of triggers, but you can still be ineffective. So I want to go into what makes triggers effective. And I have a few items. Number one being the frequency. So ongoing word of mouth is more effective than immediate word of mouth because it's ongoing. You're getting multiple triggers. And that ongoing stimulation and environmental cues will keep you coming back. So going back to that Friday song, the reason that it spiked on Fridays was because it had an ongoing trigger. Every Friday, in your brain, Friday comes every week.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't change. So while that song was viral, every Friday you have a reminder. And whether you remembered the song or not, pretty sure someone next to you remembered the song and was probably singing It's Friday on a Friday, which then triggers you to go search up that song. If you haven't heard the song It's Friday, please just go listen to it and watch the video. Like watch the music video, the whole shebang, so you get the whole feel of what I'm talking about when I say it's Friday. Shout out to Rebecca Black. I'm not slandering you. Like, go ahead, do your thing, girl. I hope you got a lot of money from it. Hate that song.
Most people do, so it's fine. It's fine.
The second thing that make a trigger effective is invoking emotion. And I'm going to go more into emotion for the next chapter because that's the next step or principle in STEP. That's what the E stands for, emotion. But evoking emotion, which usually you want to have something that's surprising, that instills awe, that is shocking, that makes people angry. Any of those more like powerful emotions is what's going to make a trigger effective. So in the book, they give an interesting example of it was like an anti-sugar campaign. And in the anti-sugar campaign, there's like this disgusting image or video of this dude drinking fat.
Oh man.
A glass of fat. And he's like chugging it, it's dripping everywhere. And the pictures in the book, it is so nasty. Imagining someone chug globs of fat. But it was effective because it disgusted people. And when people reached for their sugary beverage, it triggered them and said, yo, this is like drinking a can of sugary drinks is like drinking a can or a glass filled of fat. And so emotion is another driving force. The next thing you have is not having multiple meanings. So Terrance, when I give you the color red, what do you think of? First thing that comes to mind.
Anger.
All right. What's the second thing that comes to mind? I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this.
I'll probably say anger. I studied color theory. In some cases, it can also mean lust. Like, and there's many different forms of lust. Like, because I know that McDonald's, they use red to evoke a form of like like lust. Also, urgency and danger.
So it means a lot of things.
Yeah. 100%. It's like that's color theory. And also for the McDonald's to clear up, by lust, I mean like lusting for food too. But yeah, they're not
lusting for Ronald McDonald.
not for the clowns, like, or like lusty. I kind of left that. I was just like,
you're
McDonald's
like lust,
just means
McDonald's.
lust. People are just like, does it?
For anger, like, they do have the like the meme of the Ronald McDonald angry clown. It was like, anywho.
Maybe that's just me. But yeah, go ahead.
But the thing is, red has multiple meanings. So it could be, some people might associate it with Coca-Cola. Some people might associate it with roses or love or stop sign or stop in general. So when you have a trigger, you want it to be effective from the perspective that you want that trigger to be associated with only one thing. You don't want to have multiple meanings for the color red if you're going to use red successfully. For example, let me think of like a successful trigger. When you see an apple bit out of it, you probably think of an Apple product.
I do.
I just came off that with the dome. That was nice. I do. But the other thing is, if you have a successful trigger, it can be susceptible to a method that's called poisoning. So an example, and I'm like, on the fence about giving this example because people got different beliefs and opinions, but this is just, I think it's a valid example. Black lives matter. All lives matter. Whenever I think of Black Lives Matter, I expect an all lives matters to follow. And so what that does is muddies the message, because now that association is not fully associated with Black Lives Matter. It's also associated, that trigger is also associated with the expectation that all lives matter will follow. So that's essentially what poisoning is where you take a successful trigger and you inject yourself into it so people think of you or think negatively of that trigger. In the book, they also give the Marlboro. I always mess up the name.
Marlboro.
It's like the cigarette. Marlboro. They're gonna see like 5 minutes of me struggling. I can't.
Marlboro.
But like, I'm gonna just point to you. I'm like that thing.
Yeah.
But like with those cigarettes, what they did in one of the campaigns when it was anti-cigarettes is they took a very successful commercial or billboard of the. You're supposed to be my fill-in for Marlboro.
No, that's not the Camel. I don't smoke cigs. like
no.
Like you're looking at me like I'm a cig expert. Like I don't know.
Oh no, I just need you to say the name.
Marlboro. Yeah.
Anyway,
that one.
I'm gonna backtrack. So what they did is they injected. They spoofed the campaign or spoofed the commercial for that cigarette brand and injected something that made people kind of turn off. So whenever they saw that cigarette commercial on TV, they had instead of having that trigger of Marlboro associated with it, they also had a second trigger, which was a disgusting trigger associated with it, which was, I forget the exact, it was like mesothelioma type of thing, but it like was a trigger. So that's what poisoning is. It's basically taking an effective trigger, inserting yourself into that trigger so people think of you instead of fully thinking of what that trigger was intentionally for. And yeah, so that is it for triggers. Terrance, do you have any final thoughts for triggers before we move on to emotions?
No, I think you did an excellent job. You pretty much encapsulated exactly what triggers are. And if you want to learn more about what triggers are, I mean, obviously you can read the book. But yeah, like I think you did a wonderful job. We can move on to emotions.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to keep emotions kind of short. We've gotten feedback that our podcasts are too long. So
Yeah.
we're trying to shorten it down, family. Like, we're trying to do it.
Yeah. Bear with us. This is much harder than you think.
Yes. So many edit points. We're going to have so many.
1000%.
So with emotions drive action. Emotion is what motivates you to do something. So I'm actually going to inject a little bit of knowledge from a different book into emotions. A lot of people like to think that their logical brain, or the logical part of their brain, is what drives their emotions, or drives not their emotions, but drives their actions. And that's further from the truth. You have a physical or a logical brain, and you also have a feelings brain. And we like to have this idea that your brain is the car. It's driving your body, it's driving your actions, it's driving your decisions and motivations.
I know a book you're talking about.
Go ahead, spill it.
It's that Mark Manson book, right? I remember that. Go ahead. Do your thing.
I think it's everything is bugged.
Yeah, like I was like, I heard that. But no, do your thing.
So a lot of people like to think that their logical brain is the driver of the car, and that their feeling brain is the passenger, and that the logical brain is the one that has all the control. Further from the truth, what's in reality going on is that your feeling brain is in the car, and it's driving. It's the driver. And your logical brain is the passenger, and just trying its best to keep you on the road and to keep you from driving off the road into a ditch. Because your feeling brain is like, I will take us there. And your logical brain has to kind of coax your feeling brain to stay on the road, to do the speed limit, and to not to crash into any other cars. So bringing this back to Contagious, emotions is what drives you to do something. With that being said, when it's a trigger or a social currency, or when you're trying to make a brand, or if you're viewing a video, if you're reading an article, if you want to buy a product, there's emotional reason probably that's driving you on the underneath. But not all emotions are created equal. So you have your high arousal and low arousal emotions, and you have your positive and negative. And if you could think of it as a chart, or not a chart, as a plane, or as a T, a graph, so to speak, with quadrants, and you're on the left side, or your y-axis. Hopefully this is not getting too mathematical. I know not everybody likes math, so I'm gonna do my best to have some visuals.
No, you're doing good.
On your y-axis, on your y-axis, you have your positive, and you got your line here, and you got the negative. On your x-axis, you have your high arousal, low arousal. So you got your 4 quadrants. On the right top, you got high arousal, positive. Lower right quadrant. This is probably backwards for people. Is this my right on your screen or my left?
It's my right.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. Because it's backwards for me. Okay, so on your right bottom quadrant, you have your negative emotion, high arousal. On your top left, you have your positive, low arousal emotions. And then at the bottom left, you have your negative, low arousal. I'm doing this backwards, guys. So that being said, things like awe, excitement, humor, and amusement, those things are the things that make you want to share stuff. You want to be that funny person. You're actually more likely to share those high arousal, positive experiences, whether that's a video you experience, a meme, an article, etc., a product, things that invoke that type of emotion. And you want to do this because sharing cool things make you look cool.
Social currency.
Sharing enjoy. Exactly. So my personal example is I watch a lot of TikTok. Too much.
You do.
Too much for myself. Too much.
You send me a lot of videos.
And I send a lot of videos to my friends and family of my TikToks.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I found this hilarious. This was enjoyable. I hope you find it enjoyable too. And I know I bombard people with my TikTok videos, but I do it because I'm sharing the TikTok videos that are either awe, invoking awe, excitement, or humor. It's usually humor, sometimes dark humor, but depends on the day. One other emotion I want to capture in that top right quadrant is usefulness. So you're 25% more likely to share something that you think will be useful to others. And that's because being altruistic feels good. So for example, you might share a recommendation. There's been so many times I recommended hair care products just out of the blue because someone is, we're having a conversation about hair. Somebody will say, "Oh my gosh, I like your hair. What products do you use?" And I give my recommendation. Or there's other times where people say, "Yeah, this shampoo isn't working for me." So then I'll give my recommendation of the shampoo I used. And those little conversations are really putting dollars in people's pockets
Yeah.
more than you might think. It's going back to that word of mouth concept. Then you have your bottom right quadrant, which is the negative, high arousal. And that's things like anger and anxiety. And you're more likely to share things that make you anxious or angry because it puts us into fight or flight mode, which usually affects us physiologically or
You got it?
physiologically. No.
Physiologically.
Physiological. Right. You say it wrong once and it messes you up. I'm not going to go to that quadrant. I'm going to do that one last because I had a lot more about that. The next one, the top left quadrant, is your low arousal, high positivity or positive emotion quadrant. And you're less likely to share things in that quadrant because you're content. That is your content quadrant. And I'm not going to go and brag about a pair of basic walking shoes that I bought. It serves me no purpose. I feel like it's not useful for the person and it doesn't really excite me. I'm just pretty content. Then you have your low arousal negative emotion, which is usually sadness. You're 16% less likely to share things that make you sad and you feel like will make others sad because who wants to be a Debbie Downer? An example, you're less likely to share a sad article. So if you saw a sad article about a dog or a puppy and it didn't make you super depressed, but you're just kind of sad and you're just like, you're probably not going to share it with anybody because who wants to feel sad with you? I know I don't. Don't send me no sad articles. Yeah. So the last quadrant is your high arousal negative emotions, and that's things like anger and anxiety. And you're more likely to share things that make you feel that way because it puts you into fight or flight mode, which affects your body physically, mentally, and emotionally. Gets your adrenaline pumping. Some things that happen, bless you again, one more.
They always come in twos.
So some things that happen to your body when you are angry or anxious is that, number one, your blood pressure is going to increase. Your heart rate is going to increase. You might have sweaty palms or sweaty feet or just sweat. There's multiple things that happen to your body on a physical level when you are put in that state. And so those things that make you angry or anxious make you more likely to share. One other quick fun fact is that exercising right before viewing something also increases your likelihood to share because it puts your body in that same state.
Yeah, and I have a question for you because after listening to all of this, like, we can tell stories and we can report facts like through emotions. Like, this kind of makes me think that media companies like sit down and like think about emotions from this angle, like when they're telling stories. Do you think that may be the case?
Oh yeah, definitely. Clickbait, I feel like, is a real thing. And there's been so many times where I've looked at an article or there'll be like articles that are very misleading. And then you get like, what? This can't be true. I'm enraged. Then you click on the link to the article, you read it, and you're like, one, either the title didn't match the actual article, was clickbait, or two, it could still be written in a way that makes you emotionally driven to do something, even though if you took the time to like take some deep breaths and process the information, you would realize after processing the information that that level of anger shouldn't be there and that someone was intentionally trying to mislead you to make you more angry than you needed to be.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I feel like social media companies rely on this. I mean, if we know these statistics, then like, multi-billion dollar conglomerates, as well as like multi-million dollar like news organizations with like, decades of experience in this, certainly know these statistics. And it almost makes me a little bit cynical. Like they actually, they sit there and they plan out stories or they plan out features and they think of the emotional angle. Like, hey, we have this story about X event. Like, we can tell it from like multiple different angles. We can find the happiness aspect of it. We can find the sad aspect of it. We can find the anger aspect of it. And then like some guy in the corner or some girl in the corner is like, well, which one drives the most views? And they'd be like, well, it's anger. So let's press the rage machine button and just like, just spread information. So like, there's like, when it comes to these principles, there's tons of practical use in these principles. And people use them for various reasons. Some people use it for good, bad, and like neutral stances. Yeah, it's just like a little small tidbit.
Yeah. And I think these marketers, they know your feeling brain is in charge, and they're going to use that to manipulate your decisions. And I think first step is being aware of that and just being aware of what's going on. But then the second step is to pause whenever you're having an emotional reaction. And now I'm going on my psychology bend, so just bear with me 2 seconds. Whenever you're having an emotional reaction to something, like a strong emotional reaction, it makes the world of difference if in that moment, one, you recognize you're feeling that way, but number two, probably one of the most important steps is that you pause. You pause and you think, why am I having this reaction? Is it justifiable? Is this reaction, and I learned this in bias training, like if you're having a strong reaction to something that somebody said or did, to like take a second to pause, ask yourself why you're having that emotional reaction, and then try to understand if there's a bias at play. Same thing with the media. Take a pause, understand if they're playing to some of your biases you might have, or biases you might have, or in some of the emotions you may have. And then after you feel like you're in a calmer state, then maybe read that article.
Yeah.
You might not share it after.
Yeah, 1000%, 1000%. So
do you Oh, I was going to ask, do you think this is a good time to talk about public?
Yeah, so we are on the first P of step, because there's two P's in step.
Yes.
Yeah, it's step.
Step.
So I'm gonna see if I can burn right through this. So you guys bear with me. I'm gonna. So the next topic is public. And what public essentially is, it's built to show means built to grow. The more public something is, the more likely someone will want to imitate it. Design products and initiatives that advertise themselves and create some sort of behavior residue. So let's go into a bit of a deeper dive. It's hard to see what people are doing privately. And because it's hard to see, it's difficult to copy. When you make something, a behavior, idea, or a product more observable, it makes it easier to imitate. And then it starts to catch on. It has this contagious factor to it, or this virality factor into it. So let's go into an example, just as a starting point. Imagine you're traveling. You arrive in a foreign city. You have nowhere to go. You begin looking for a restaurant. Which one do you choose? And this is a rhetorical question. More than likely, you'll probably look for the restaurant where a lot of people are in it, and you will go to that restaurant. So let's get into the example of why. Let's get into the reasons of why. So that's imitation behavior. And why do people imitate? People imitate in part because other people's choices provide information. Sometimes we don't know the right answer. And even if we do, we're not entirely sure what to do. To help resolve this uncertainty, we often look to others, see what they're doing, and follow them because we probably don't know something. This is kind of called social proof. Like when other people do it, it proves a behavior, it proves an idea, and they kind of label this aspect of this concept social proof. So here's a small example. You might not know this, but bartenders and baristas, when they start their shift, they actually fill that tip jar. If you ever seen tip jars, like in certain places, in certain establishments, they actually put money in there themselves. And what they found out is that when they load the tip jar before their shift start, before the bar opens, when people come in and customers unknowingly come in, they see that tip jar filled up, and they assume that other people put money in, so the customer service must be good, or they feel just like a slight bit of pressure that, hey, maybe I should put money in this tip jar too. So they found that when they have like two different scenarios where the baristas and the bartenders don't put any money in the tip jar, it's a bit of an inertia to get the first person to put that money in, which leads to other people put money in, like a domino effect, because that's social proof. When you fulfill that social proof need for them, people are much more likely to throw money in. Other smaller examples of like the idea of making something public are, take, for example, Facebook frames. Those are something that became very popular last decade, whether it's the LGBT facial frame, say Paris facial frame, not facial frame, sorry, profile frames. Like if you ever use Facebook, and like every now and again when a special event were to happen, like Facebook would be like, do you want to try out this new frame and like frame your profile picture inside of this hashtag or inside of this movement? And, the very first one was like the LGBT one, Pray for Paris, but it's been years since that feature has been introduced, and they have like tons of those. I can't name you all of them, and I've practically lost count. That's an example of social proof and making some sort of cause public. And Facebook is really good at this. Another example is just the idea of a hashtag in and of itself. When you hashtag something like, for example, Stop Asian Hate or a BLM, that's a form of making something public, and it provides social proof. And as well as like the Facebook donations, like, I'm gonna just keep naming Facebook. Although Facebook is a tech company, the world's best marketers and social psychologists work there. They're fully aware of these premises, and they utilize them when they build these products. So when you donate money on Facebook, you have this option to make it public. And when you make it public, it shows the amount of people who donated. And I believe the donation metric, how much the dollar value of the donation. And that kind of encourages people, at least it encourages me. Like sometimes when I'm donating, like for my birthday, or I would say, hey, this is my birthday, or this is like a special event, please donate with me. The reason why I share it is not for like vanity purposes, is because I'm aware that if I make my behavior public, more people are likely to imitate it, because we just assume that this is the right thing to do, and we look for others to provide information. So you can also leverage that in your own products. And we're going to get into much bigger examples of how exactly you can do this. And the main example that I really want to cover is like this idea of, Movember. That's a perfect one. Movember, the mustache. Like when guys shave their mustache off. When they shave their facial hair off in the beginning of the month, and then they start to grow this mustache. And that is the perfect example of making a behavior public and social proofing something. So let's look at it from a problem perspective. So Movember is, for those who don't know, is to raise awareness about cancer, and to get people to ultimately donate during the month of November to like cancer research and like cancer charities. So let's think about it. When donations are generally considered private, when you donate to like a cancer organization, how many people do you generally tell? Maybe you tell a couple of people, but it's not at all a viral or popular idea. So you have this problem, and let's understand this problem. You have a behavior that is considered private. Donations and where you put your money at are largely considered private, and they don't really have a high velocity of like transmission. So what these guys thought of in Australia, and they didn't really know it at the time, but they kind of stumbled upon like the perfect example of making something public. They pretty much created this plan where they like shaved off their facial hair and left their mustaches on, and they grew it. And it started off with just a couple of dozen guys. And those dozen guys obviously interact in their daily lives. And the first thing that people ask is like, why do you have this crazy mustache on your face? Like mustaches haven't been in style since like my parents were kids. And the first thing people would say is that I'm donating to like a cancer research. So it sparked that conversation, it triggered something. As it went on, it started off very small. Maybe it started off with a couple of dozen people. And then like the next year, that dozen people grew into 100 people. That 100 people grew the year afterwards into like thousands of people, and those thousands of people now grew into millions, to the point that no matter where you go across the world, at least where I'm aware of, whether it's Hong Kong, Japan, Europe, America, people are aware of Movember. And this is the example of making a private thing public. Those guys who started that Movember trend, they wanted to make people more aware of cancer. They wanted to encourage people to donate to cancer research. So they essentially create this aspect where we're going to advertise. We're going to use ourselves, our bodies, as advertisements. We're going to grow these crazy mustaches, and people are going to know that this is Movember, and it's going to remind people of Movember, to the point that during the month of November, when you see someone with a crazy mustache, you instantly make that attachment, because the idea is such commonplace for us now that this is about cancer. This is about raising awareness. And they successfully took an idea that we have took for granted of this cancer research in the month of November, which was private like decades ago, to something that is like quite well known and quite public. And every year in November, just like clockwork, men start growing their mustaches across the world. So that's the example of Movember. And the key takeaways from Movember is, through their actions and their words, the participants raised awareness by promoting private and public conversations in regards to mental health. Most ideas and products are consumed privately, and this is something that we need to understand. Although it may not matter to you personally, it matters a lot for the success of organizations, businesses, and ideas. If people can't see what others are doing, they cannot imitate it. Solving this problem requires making a private idea public, like the Movember example, generating public signals for private choices, actions, and opinions, taking what was once an unobservable like thought or behavior and transforming that to a more observable one makes ideas contagious, like the book suggests. And before I get into other examples, Paige, you want to take a moment and talk about what do you think about this? Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. So something that I find interesting is that when you mentioned, I think you called it social pruning. Social proofing.
Yeah.
So I used to watch the show Brain Games. Fun fact, the brain can only process, we have like upwards of 400 million terabytes of data just entering our brain every second, and we're only able to really process 40 of them. So stuff like social proofing allows your brain to take a shortcut, because your brain loves shortcuts. And what I find interesting is that one reason that people do this, because of the shortcut, is that it makes things easier for them to make decisions. As humans, we regret our decisions. So if you have 3 flavors of ice creams, you're going to have an easier time of selecting one of the 3 and have less regret and more satisfaction than you will with, for instance, having 30 different flavors of ice cream to pick from. And if you have those 30 flavors, you're more likely, if everyone's picking this weird flavor called cookie dough extreme, you're probably going to pick cookie dough extreme because 1, your brain is taking the shortcut. 2, they're not living with regret. They're happy. They have high satisfaction. So your brain's going to make the assumption that you will too. So just wanted to tie that back too, just from like not even a psychological standpoint, but also just like a mental standpoint or neuroscience standpoint of what your brain does in functioning. And that is trying to make decisions quickly, taking shortcuts left and right. And then also trying to make decisions that you won't regret and decisions that are going to give you high satisfaction. And if you have social proofing going on, that just shortens the pathway to getting to that decision.
100%.
So, just a little science tidbit to go on top of everything that you've been describing so far.
Yeah, 100%. And what you mentioned actually that's the paradox of choice. And like people solve that often with social proofing. It is proven that as we get presented more options, especially us in Western societies and free societies, that we tend to like have like this paralysis. Like, I don't know what to choose. The most obvious example is probably Netflix. When you open up the Netflix catalog and you're like, what am I going to watch? And then Netflix has the trending section, which is social proofing, because it's showing what other people, generally speaking, our Netflix watching is private, but in that trending section is showing what other people are doing, what other people are watching. So like limit your choice. Or you probably just watch something that you already watch. That's not social proofing, but that shows like how powerful the paradox of choice is, that you can be presented rationally thousands, 10,000s of options, and those options can be great for you, but you just get paralyzed and you decide to watch what you're comfortable with and what you're already familiar with, because we just have this innate needs like limit information. So let's go into more examples of what the idea of making things public. Let's go into other examples of making things public. I'm just going to rattle these off. These are just more so quick examples. If you ever sent a text message not a text message. If you ever sent like a message using the mail app on your iPhone, like that sent from iPhone tagline is an example of social proof and making an idea public. When you send an email, no one really knows the email client that you use, and no one actually knows the device that you use. But Apple wants to promote the iPhone, especially earlier on, and they still do this to my knowledge. And they have that sent from iPhone like tagline at the very end of each text message. You can remove that, not text message, email. And you can remove that, but most people leave it on just by default because they don't really care. But it also encourages and it actively markets the iPhone every single time you send an email. Another example of like social proofing are like logos. Like this is an example. Social proofing and making things public are logos. When you look at the large Nike logos that exist on shoes or hoodies or jackets, like It's making something public. If that logo was removed, no one knows what brand that you're wearing. So that idea becomes far less contagious. And companies like Burberry and Ralph Lauren notoriously make like their logos huge. I know the Ralph Lauren polo player, and some polos are like really big. It's like as big as somebody's like stomach or like torso or like chest area. And they want to do that because they want people to see like that polo logo from like a long distance away. And that's an example of like making something public. Another example, I'm a huge fan of hip hop, like many of you are. When producers like put their, their tagline, like Metro Boomin, or what's it called, like Rick Ross when it comes to Maybach music, that's an example of turning a private thing public. Most people had no idea who produced the beat. But when you hear that tagline at the beginning of the song, you start to connect the producer because he's publicly displaying who he is, and now he has a stronger brand presence than someone who don't do it, because the beat credit and whoever made the instrumentation is generally it's public information, but it's generally presented in a private fashion. When you click on YouTube, when you open the Spotify, you have no clue who produced the beat. But in case of people like Metro Boomin, you instantly know he did it because he has his tagline sprinkled throughout the beat. Another example is DJ Khaled. DJ Khaled is a marketing genius, as obnoxious that he may be sometimes, because he constantly make who he is and what he does public. And many executives and many DJs, what they do is often seen private or is very ephemeral, and it's like in a very small scale, intimate basis. A DJ might perform at a show, but no one knows that he did it publicly. A DJ might facilitate two artists getting together, but no one has any idea that he did this. This is a private or a closed off behavior. The idea of all of this is to make something observable. So those are just quick examples. Let me go into a bit more. This is a perfect example. So earlier on, I said you can make something public also by design. Now, I studied design in college. I also do a little bit of design work myself professionally. And one thing that I really admired about Apple is that they constantly make certain things about their brand more observable. So a classic example is this, and we take this for granted. But if you can remember a time, let's say 15 years ago, 2004, 2003, even like 01, you had headphones. And generally, tech products are often dark. They're like gray, they're dark, they're kind of beige. Often like headphones are almost certainly black. I mean, check out my headphones right now. Apple back then decided to do something totally different. They zig what everybody else was zagging. And they decided to make their headphones white. Now, why did they do this? Because headphones, oftentimes people don't know what brand headphones are. Look at these headphones. Do you have any clue what brand they are? You don't. So how do you make headphones public? Apple decided to use this bold white color. And now if I pull out, and I have some Apple headphones on my desk, if I show you those Apple headphones, you instantly know that I have like what's it called? Those Apple EarPods or earbuds. You instantly know it based off of the design. They made something that is like, hard to notice, extremely noticeable, and it's extremely unique. So, I had like a little brief write-up. The Apple iPod and later iPhone headphones pretty much advertised themselves, and the advertisement was baked into the design. So just a key takeaway from this example is that when you're designing a product, you can design it in a way that it can make it publicly observable and people can notice it. Another example of a behavior that's public is the I voted sticker. Like in the short, you see people when they vote in November in America, they leave out with this I voted sticker, and voting is definitely private. You're in a booth by yourself. You tend to go alone with a small group of people, and then give you an I voted sticker, and you can like just show publicly that, hey, I voted. You can show it to your friends. You can also post it on social media. Another example of making something public, and this is actually a reversal. So like the DARE campaign, when they said don't do drugs, and they gave statistics about all the people who are doing drugs back into like the 80s and the 90s, they actually had like a reverse effect of what they intended. So the intent was to stop people from doing drugs, but by telling people, by giving statistics of how many people were doing drugs, they pretty much advertised or made public that, hey, my friends are doing drugs. So some people are like, you know what? I'm going to do drugs. So the conclusion of all of this is that monkey see, monkey do. We tend to follow what other people are doing. If we see people are doing something, we want to imitate it. This is social proofing. So to get our products and ideas to become more popular, we just simply need to make them more observable. And that is public in a nutshell. Okay, so yeah, that's public. So Paige, you think we should get into like practical values now, which is the second P out of STEP?
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So the next topic is practical value. And practical value is essentially sharing valuable information that help others. If social currency is about the information sender and how it makes them look and feel, practical value is mostly about the information receiver. It's about saving people money, time, or helping someone have a good experience. Practical value is akin to giving advice. People talk about what bars have the cheapest beers, what stocks to invest in, and what routes would save them the most time at work. Think about the last time you had to make a difficult decision page that required a lot of research. You probably asked one or two people or even more like what to do, and they probably share an opinion or they sent you a link to help you, like sent you a link to a website to help you. And unsurprisingly, some of the most practical and contagious ideas are always about saving money. But, in that concept, please be aware that the value of that discount when it comes to saving money is seen differently depending on the price. So let's talk about it. So the book talks about the rule of 100. Businesses use this easy principle when it comes to creating discounts for customers. If a product is priced below $100 or below, they usually use a percentage such as 10% off, and it will appear more attractive to customers versus something that says $10 off. Conversely, if something costs more than $100, a numerical amount, such as a dollar amount, will appear to be more attractive than a percentage. So take, for example, a $2,000 laptop. Would you like, which one would actually encourage you to buy it more? If it says, hey, you save 10% off on this laptop versus they say you save $200 off on this laptop. One feels much bigger, although they're rationally the exact same thing. And so we have to keep this in mind that people aren't exactly rational. And this is basically behavioral economics. People do not evaluate things in absolute terms, but they evaluate things in relatively speaking. 50 cents for a cup of coffee isn't just 50 cents for a cup of coffee. Whether it seems like a fair price or not depends on what your expectations are. If you live in New York City, 50 cents for a cup of coffee seems like a pretty cheap deal and a great steal for like a cup of coffee. But if you're from like rural India and you're like a farmer, 50 cents for a cup of coffee may seem outrageous. So when it comes to practical value and you're trying to price something, when you're trying to price a product, just keep that in mind. But when you're giving discounts, another important thing is to consider is diminishing sensitivity. We know those companies that are constantly offering sales and they're constantly offering discounts, and that no longer affects us anymore. If you live in America and you go to Walgreens and CVS, there's sales everywhere. And to a certain extent, customers almost expect the sale price to be the final price. But when you go to an Apple store, there rarely ever sells. So when they finally introduce a sale, they're much more likely to have customers walk into the building because that's something that customers are very sensitive to compared to like CVS, where like that sensitivity has been numb and is diminished over time. So in conclusion, practical value is simply news you can use. Useful things get shared. So highlight the incredible value and package knowledge and expertise so people can pass that information and those ideas and products along to other people. And that is practical value. So we can move on into the next one.
Which is stories.
Yeah.
So stories are vessels for information. The ordinary stories we tell each other daily not only provide entertainment, but also information. And so I'm going to tell you a story and let's see if you can pick out. Oh, actually, this actually just happened the other day. So I bought a dining room table,
Mm-hmm.
a dining room table set on Amazon, and I sent it to the wrong address,
Okay.
which burns. So I got the notification, hey, your package has been shipped. And I was like, oh my gosh, I get to track it. And then I realized that it was not being sent to my home. And so I called Amazon. First, I tried to use the app to like cancel. Since it had already shipped, they couldn't cancel it. They couldn't cancel it. Then I tried to use the app to like return the item or to stop it mid shipment. Couldn't do that. I ended up calling Amazon and explaining the situation, and the customer representative was really nice, and they were able to contact the reseller of the piece because it was a third party, and that reseller from that moment on was able to contact USP or UPS or whatever they use, whatever shipping company they use to I don't know if it may be FedEx. And they were able to get them to reroute it to my house. So now it's on its way. It'll be here this week. And I'm satisfied because I didn't have to go through a whole process of finding out how to return this thing that wasn't sent to my house, as well as how to get a refund and that whole process. And I still wanted the table set. With that being said, in this story that I just told about this Amazon incident, there is multiple pieces of information. One, finding furniture can be hard. It took me forever to find this table. I've been looking for the table for like 2 to 3 weeks. Finding furniture is hard. Number two, Amazon has decent or good furniture because I wouldn't have bought it if I didn't think the piece of furniture was good. Three, I had an issue and the app didn't work. So I wasn't able to self-service my issue with the furniture being sent to the wrong address. The fourth piece of information is that Amazon corrected my error. The customer service was great, the people were friendly, and they were able to get it to resolved. And overall, the fifth piece of information is that I'm very satisfied with my experience, and I'm still waiting for my table, but I'm happy that I didn't have to go through that whole ordeal. So just in that story, even though it might seem like a comical story, like a man that sucks type of story, we're still able to pull out pieces of information. And that those pieces of information, those 5 pieces of information, might influence someone else to try Amazon to buy some furniture because they know if something goes wrong, they'll be able to reach out to customer service and have a good experience. So I'm going to keep this section short because stories is pretty much that. It's just summing up. It's the stories that you tell that have pieces of information. In the book, they talked about Jared. We should all know, probably all know Jared from Subway, Eat Fresh. But in his whole story, he loses all this weight and he did it by eating Subway every day. So now you know that Subway is healthy enough to eat every day, that you'll lose weight, and that it's affordable, that fast food is affordable and healthy, which sometimes those things don't connect. We don't associate health with fast food. But Subway was able to make a brand off of that through Jarrett's story. I hear Jarrett is not doing well today, so maybe we should cut that out. Now to think
I think
about
that's
it.
cool. I think that's cool. If you don't give too much attention to it, like you can just simply just say a fact, like Subway, back in the day before, Jared became infamous, what he did later on. Back in the day, Jared was a Subway mascot, and they used his story as a valence or like a Trojan horse to like carry their brand and a bunch of information that was wrapped around their brand. I think
Okay.
that's what you can talk about. I mean, it's a matter of fact.
That's
Yeah.
true. Okay. So for example, Subway, we hear about Jarrett's story back when, before Jared became what he became today. Subway was able to build a brand or craft a compelling story that, hey, our fast food is healthy enough for you to lose weight, which there was a long time where we didn't associate health with fast food. Those things didn't go hand in hand, but Subway was able to make a brand through telling a story that, hey, Subway, you can eat fresh. So the takeaway is when building a brand, crafting a compelling story that evokes emotion but also gives information is important. And these stories can keep people talking. So you may share this story with one person, that person might share it with another, and so forth. And that's how things go viral. We're sharing word of mouth. We're word of mouth telling people about our experiences. And if you have a compelling story that's crafted, that story will be told not only directly to one person, but indirectly to 10 more, and so forth. So with that, I think this is a good point for us to wrap up.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah. So the book is called Contagious, and it talks about 6 easy principles, otherwise known as STEP. And just as a reminder, those principles are social currency, triggers, emotions, public, practical value, and stories. We couldn't go into complete detail. These books are hundreds of pages long and they're very deep. We encourage you, if you want to learn more, to check out the book. It's a great book. It's available on audio, ebook, and also physical copies as well. And we should probably take the time out to introduce our next book because that has been finalized. You want to take it away?
Yeah. So the next book is going to be The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and super excited to read this book and to share our thoughts at the end of April.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the Untitled Book Club Podcast. I'm your co-host, Terrance Reynolds. This is Page Flipper. This is episode 5. Thank you guys for listening. Check us out on our next episodes. Goodbye.